Today, I'm sitting down with someone whose work I truly admire, Cis Sykes. Cis has over 40 years of clinical experience, specializing in the healing of trauma and addiction. She is one of the founding trainers at the IFS Institute and travels the world teaching the internal family systems therapy model that brings a deeply compassionate and innovative approach to healing addictive processes and the wounds that lie underneath. Her powerful and transformative book, IFS Therapy for Addictions, was released in 2023 and is truly a gift for all who seek to understand addiction in a different way. I invited Cis into this conversation because I believe the topic of addictive behaviors is something that touches absolutely all of us, not just those struggling with severe substance abuse. Whether it's reaching for food late at night, doing a lot of strong exercises, binge watching TV, endlessly scrolling our phones, or finding it hard to slow down. We all have parts that at times are trying to soothe, numb, or protect us from deeper pain. In this episode, Cis and I explore why addictive behaviors are not signs of weakness, but parts trying their best to care for us. How compassion, not criticism, becomes the doorway to true transformation. And why internal family systems therapy model is one of the most safe, respectful, and profoundly healing approaches when working with addictive and self-soothing processes. This conversation is truly for everyone, for anyone who longs to understand their inner world with more tenderness and clarity. Together, we'll look beyond the surface, beyond the shame, and begin to see the parts of us that simply need care, connection, and healing. I invite you to stay with us until the very end, because somewhere in this conversation, you might just find the understanding and the hope you have been quietly longing for. Let's begin. Good morning, Cis. Welcome to your Soul Therapist podcast.
Hi, Vlada. So glad to be here.
Thank you so much for your time. And I know with someone who is offering to IFS community that amount of helpful information, and I know your upcoming training level 2 in Portugal is in October, and I've seen your very busy calendar. I really can imagine how precious this hour we have together. So my first question will be to you. If that's okay, we go a little bit to explore intersection of IFS and spirituality. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
No. I think the best thing about IFS and spirituality is that it's open to each individual to determine for themselves how that works and lands for them. The model in and of itself, this idea of we have a self and we have parts and we work on a self-to-part relationship wasn't designed as a spiritual model. It was designed as a clinical model. And it's expanded to think about larger systems, and it's expanded to think about the spiritual realm as well. So, and I love that about it. I have taught in a variety of IFS spiritual communities. My first level 1 that I taught was an evangelical Christian community. That's how they identified. That's how all of their therapists identified. So it was a very Christian point of view, and their view of the self was very nuanced, that the self is a reflection of Christ within, and that Christ is available to them. And all of the unburdenings they did was, of course, to Jesus, to God. Very shortly thereafter, I went and taught IFS and presented in the IFS Zen community.
Wow, interesting.
So that was very shortly after. And that was very interesting as well. And I said to them, what are you inviting me for? You all live inside. Why am I here? You're experts at this. Far more expert at this than me. But what they would feel, they have a more, they view the inner connection to Buddha, Bodhisattva, or to the Buddha nature will be similar to self. But the sense of touching into that and using that as resource. So in both communities, even though they might seem very different, the idea is that when we can unblend and we have connection to ourself, we also are a little bit more available to a spiritual connection. And at the same time, we can invite spiritual connection. In most spiritual practices, prayer is an invitation to invite spirit into our lives. It's a request, right? So that in different kinds of ways, I think that IFS can make us available, a little bit more available to the resources that are out there. And for other people who don't identify with a particular spiritual practice, they might say, well, I believe in the universe, I believe in love, I believe in a universal grace, I believe in good energies. So some people will speak about it this way. And this too is very important, because when they can connect, Dick talks about guides as a way to talk about spiritual energies, that and so many people feel that they connect to guides in their life. Other people don't have any words for this, and yet they still feel a sense of a spirit that's available to them. So I think for IFS therapists, it's really good to ask our clients, and I always have asked, do you have a spiritual practice? And last, this is a long answer to your question, I like to know if people grew up with a spiritual practice, because many times that spiritual practice impacted their development, depending upon how their parents, their family, and their extended family connected, and depending upon what their experience was in that environment, whether it was positive or not so positive for them and their system. So these are all important areas. And there's more to say, of course, where IFS therapists can invite our relationship with spirit into the clinical room and into the work.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing this. And as you put it on your description, is a wisdom, inner wisdom that is within us. And in IFS, we call it self-energy, which already sounds a little bit different from the traditional psychotherapeutic model. There is the self-energy, and I love your name to it. You perceive it, I guess, as that inner wisdom.
It is. I think it's that voice, sometimes a way to say that little voice inside, that way in which we have a knowing. And I think that even people with very, very traumatized or chaotic systems, when we just even for moments can pause and sort of listen inside them. It's my experience that people can have access to that, even amidst a lot of chaos in their lives.
Yes, and the whole principle of IFS is the fact that the more we access that self-energy, the more we are able to heal parts, correct?
Yeah, well, you can look at it both ways. The more we access self, the more we can heal parts. The more we appreciate our parts, the more they can unblend and free us to feel into and access our self-energy. So it's a two-way street.
Yes, but at the end of the day, everything we do right in the IFS therapy or sessions is what you just described. Soothing parts, connecting with them, helping them to relax and trust us more, so the self can lead, right? And the more the self leads, it's like a cycle process where at the end, the idea is to be more in self, more in self energy.
Absolutely. Our whole goal is to have some kind of self-leadership. And just to say, Dick ended up calling this process of this inner witnessing and also sort of a sense of inner accepting or openness or compassion for parts. He called this self energy because when he was first doing it, clients would say, after they would do basically what we now call unblending, but do some connection to different parts of themselves, they'd say, you know what, I feel like I'm more myself now. They had regulated. Again, these were not things we discussed in the 1980s or 90s, too much about regulation, and we were learning to discuss it and implement it into the work. So he did not have sort of, he wasn't trying to achieve some sort of status or by using the word self or the capital. He was, like not a Jungian sense exactly, just a sense really of using the language of the client. So that is where he came from that. Now it is many people have applied different meanings to that over the years, but his initial meaning to that was that clients just felt more like themselves. So that sense of connection to ourselves is really powerful.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm really curious, when you just discovered IFS model, did you have some skeptical parts that were questioning if this is gonna work, if talking to parts will work, unburdening will work, giving our, negative beliefs to the air or to the water, is this gonna really heal and help us to transform? Did you have those parts?
Oh, definitely. I have lots of skeptical parts. You know, I'm initially trained. I'm from Chicago. I live in Chicago still. It's my lifelong home. And Dick Schwartz was raised in Chicago, and he, of course, is his initial degree, his PhD is in family systems. And I was trained in family systems, so I knew him in the family systems community. So I heard the first time he presented this model. So, and it was just at a little workshop on a Friday morning at the place where he worked at Institute for Juvenile Research, where they did a lot of family therapy training. So we all heard that Dick has a new idea. So we drove downtown to hear Dick's new idea, and he began to talk about this, having his clients who are struggling with disordered eating for sort of find different parts of themselves, the part that wanted to binge or the part that wanted to restrict, and then the other part that hated all that. And he began out of just sort of frustration to do sort of family therapy techniques. Well, okay, let's just listen to those two parts. Let's have this other part step back. In family therapy, you might say, okay, Dad, you step back, allow mom and daughter to speak, this sort of organizing a structure that allows for healthy interaction and healthy relationships to grow. And he began to try to apply that to these different sort of aspects of the person's personality. So that all sounded super interesting to me, but at the time I didn't pursue it. I thought, oh, okay, really, really interesting. Also very radical compared to family therapy. And he went on to spend many years talking with therapists about it and thinking about it before he wrote his book. This was in 81, 82, maybe 83, and his book came out in 95. So I went back to the work that I was doing at the time, which I was working with a lot of survivors of trauma, and learning so much in those relationships and in those clinical relationships and how that worked and the wisdom in their systems. I learned so much. Trauma survivors see parts so very clearly in their therapists, and in particular, because we are here to provide some sort of offering for them, and their parts are very skeptical. So I went back to that. So when I came back to IFS was a number of years later. He just had started training people in 97, 96, 97, and I came in 98. And I thought, does this really work? What is this like? But what I would say is that the best way for people to appreciate this model is to experience it. It's called an experiential model. It's not a talk therapy. We don't talk to we connect to our clients and talk and hear about their day and their week and their life and their history. And at the same time, the experiential part is inviting them to notice their own process. So, what convinced me is to have my own experiences.
Okay. And with time, you felt like your skeptical part was observing how the model and the process is impacting yourself and your own parts, right? And also seeing results in other people, and skeptical part just gave you a little bit more space. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, in general, I was open to the model. The skepticism was a part, it wasn't a huge part. But at the same time, the whole process of unburdening, I think it really helps that Dick and others in our community acknowledge the roots of the unburdening is from, sort of early practices of shamans and other healers and various spiritual practices. And I think it helps to sort of recognize that for hundreds, thousands of years, really, humans have known that through ceremony, one of the things we need to do is connect to ourselves, notice things that we need to let go of, throw them in the fire, and connect to something beyond ourselves as well. So this has been a human experience, ecstatic experience, really, for some, in some practices. So I think to root the IFS connection to our parts and unburdening process to these deeper roots that have existed just in that are more universal, really, is very important. And I think it helps people understand how that works and why
Yes.
it's important.
I agree with you very, very much. Listening about it and then having your own personal experience is very different. And I wonder if there is any special moment you remember. I'm sure you had a lot of special sessions or moments or experiences where there was a moment of really some sort of transformation or shift or change once you worked with someone in a session, or maybe you have been a client in yourself. Was there anything that you can recall that happened in the IFS session?
Well, I think in my own work and with clients, I've sat many, many times where they release a particular burden of not unworthiness, or no, that sense, that a belief that no one's ever coming for them, that they're not important, just sort of carrying around the sense of toxic worthlessness or shame. And I've seen it many times, and it's very, very interesting because people's body language changes, their face lifts a little bit, usually, and something very real is happening. So I think that, and at the same time, I'm going to just say that I witness over and over again when people just can unblend and connect to a part, a real sense of settling in their system. So this process of knowing ourselves, connecting, building relationship with ourselves, is ongoing. And I don't want to underestimate the power of unburdening, but I also don't want to underestimate the power of connecting to ourselves from self. And I find that to be, in any session, connecting to any part, protector or exile, is moves the work forward in really important ways.
Yes, that moment where we just turn our attention internally and we begin observing, witnessing, saying hello to this world, which for a lot of people who begin this journey when they are in their 50s or later, can be very radical. Using your word, can be very new, very radical. What do you mean? There is myself and everything is not myself. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of skeptical parts around it. But thank you for your recommendation. It's just to have a try. And
yeah, and I think when people say, how am I supposed to talk to my parts? I say, well, I don't know. What do you say to yourself in the morning when you first wake up? Because we are talking, we have an inner dialogue going all the time. And so I say, we're just connecting with the dialogue you already are having. And you are already experiencing different kinds of feelings, some of which you label and some of which you don't. Feelings of dread, feelings of happiness, feeling contentment. We don't label them all, but we already have them. And we have lots and lots of inner dialogues that we already have. So I say to my clients, sometimes I say, your parts are talking to you. We're going to teach you how to talk back.
this is hilarious.
Because this is not outside of our experience. We're just accepting that. What do you say to yourself on your mutter to yourself on the way into a meeting at work? People are always in a sort of inner dialogue or inner experience. And so we're not inventing inner experience. We're inviting people to do it a little differently.
Thank you so much for these words of validation. I believe a lot of people felt a relief hearing that it's just putting it into words properly, but this is already happening. Parts already talking to each other and to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I worked for many, many years with people who had what we now call complex trauma, but they had grown up in families where there was violence and chaos and enormous amount of suffering. And they always just knew they had little children, little parts, little vulnerable parts inside themselves. We call them exiles. It's just our vulnerability. And they always knew they had vulnerability inside themselves. And they always knew that they had to learn how to protect themselves. So there's so much that we know. And so this was before IFS existed, that people understood that they had vulnerability and they learned how to protect themselves one way or another.
Yeah.
Some ways it didn't. And so tuning people into the way they're already working is very helpful.
Absolutely. It's life-changing, it's validating. And in my personal experience, I thought I went very deep, but only when I started doing my own IFS therapy, I realized that I actually never went to those corners of my inner world and never discovered those parts. It changed everything. It was, for me personally, extremely transformational. And I want to talk to you, of course, about the area of your expertise that I admire, the strength, your strong parts, your courageous parts that took on themselves this area, which is addictive processes.
Yeah.
And I personally feel a lot of sadness witnessing the world today. For example, when I receive people on retreats, and some people feel a lot of struggle letting go their phone for a few days, for example. And just witnessing, my own personal addictions in different styles, in different ways, and how we are just coping in so many ways that we don't perceive as an addictive strategy or ways to not be with ourselves, right? This work that you do right now, I think is so relevant as never before. And can I ask you a question? Those types of addictions, like, we will not go immediately into hardcore situations, but for example, traveling, shopping, being in the phone, stress and working, can we consider this? How can we name it from the IFS lens perspective? It's behavior.
It's such I just appreciate the way you're just describing all this, Vlada, that there isn't an us and them, we who have it together, and those people who are addicted. That's wishful thinking. That will be parts. And so, of course, everyone doesn't suffer in the same way, but this is why I've tried to rename this. I try to stay away from words like addict and addiction, because people have many, many ideas around this that we don't even know are very, very deep in our own viewpoint, our own psyche, and it may be based on our personal experience or just something else in our lives. So I kind of use these terms, an addictive process, because I think that I've worked with people who were very young, who developed very compulsive processes around food, around touch or sex, around shoplifting, having things, that they very young as children, as they tried to cope with the neglect and exploitation in their lives. And of course, that's, but for all of us if we jump, so there's that. So there's so giving people a sense that you've found ways to function in a completely dysfunctional environment, but you have found ways to function from very young. So to honor the parts of us that may have become sort of compulsive early on, but that were the ways in which that helped us. So I stole candy so I could give it to people so they would be my friends. I got into fights in the playground so that everyone would think I was strong and no one would come after me. You know, these are important ways in which we can look at how, and people can develop compassion for themselves. Noticing I was 7, I was 6, I was 4, I was 9, I was 12 when I began to develop some of these parts. So to begin with this idea that this is here to, that we are trying to help ourselves with a completely untenable situation. And no one to depend on. So there's that. Now, so I've gone to the developmental piece, which is why I talk about it as a process. So another reason I talk about it as a process is there's a developmental piece, but there's also a sense of the word addiction is scary to people. They
Yes,
feel like, well, I'm not addicted to heroin, you know, I'm
exactly.
not addicted to, I'm not even addicted to sleeping pills, but I take them, but I'm not addicted, but I'm still struggling. I still feel like I lean on it too much, or I lean on edibles, or I drink and take my sleeping pills. And then I get on my phone at 2 in the morning, and then I'm up till 5 in the morning. And what's going on here with me? So, you know, this other piece of it, the other reason I like to call it an addictive process is because I don't want people to have to sort of identify themselves as addict or having an addiction in order to talk about it and ask for support around it. And I also that's on the client end. On the therapist end, I want therapists to not feel like they have to immediately refer to a 12-step program and a residential treatment center because after 6 months somebody tells me I'm up all night doing porn and drinking. And I've never told you that before, but now I'm telling you that. And then the client goes, the therapist goes, oh my God, well, have you talked about 12-step? Have you thought about, increased care? So we send them away. And I think that IFS offers us a way to have that conversation in a nuanced, helpful way, which is so parts of you are engaging in, are really into porn watching at night and are seeking that out. Parts of you are drinking during that time or getting high is at the same time. And other parts of you must have some opinion about that because they've stopped you from telling me. So right there, we have a system. Right there, we have the polarity, which is I'm doing this thing and I have a part that says I should not be doing this thing. I should not be doing that. And that part is so strong. It says I shouldn't even tell my therapist who I'm actually sort of is supposed to accept me. But this is how much we stigmatize ourselves. And the stigma exists in the outer culture as well.
Yeah, there is so much shame, so much shame. Even when I do my little things, I feel full of shame. And it's not like big situation.
Right. We sit on our phone and follow Instagram for a half hour rather than taking a walk, and we're just like, what did I just do? Or of course, if it goes much longer. So what I like to say is that IFS offers us the exact tools of looking at the system of that. Everybody says we treat the whole person. IFS has a very specific way of helping someone identify not just their parts, but their pattern. Nothing is more pattern than something that has become addictive, which is to say compulsive and repetitive, despite negative consequences. So what are negative consequences? The suffering. And yet our managers keep us going and the firefighters keep taking us out or soothing us. And what happens, to our exiles in that process? We get further and further away from whatever the real pain is.
Yeah.
And more involved in trying to control something that feels out of control. So I like IFS for looking at the systemic nature of any kind of process and helping people see that that there's a reason why they have soothers and escape artist parts. And they are undervaluing their managers that function and keep them going to work, school, taking care of kids, etc., despite time spent in firefighter activity. And when those two parts can get a little break, the two protectors, when they even can give them just a short break of just saying, I get it. I need you both. I need parts to keep me going and keep me on track. And these parts are doing something for me that take me out. I do need a break. They're providing a little too much of one in a certain kind of way, but I need a break. And when we have just the littlest space from that, people will absolutely be able to feel their excess, which is the shame, the loneliness, the abandonment, the hopelessness. It's right there. but we have to help the protectors feel a little bit of self energy first. So this process is right there available to us. It's taught directly in level 1. And yet, if I don't say addictive processes, people say, well, what are we doing with addiction? I don't really know. Even though a process of recognizing managers, recognizing firefighters, recognizing polarities, and unblending is an essence of level 1. So it's a way in which we have, as psychotherapists, this idea that psychotherapy is this thing, and it's about anxiety and depression and trauma. And addiction is this different thing. And my message is that they are both rooted in our vulnerability and our struggle and our pain and our ways to cope with pain. And
I love how you name these parts. You call them soothers. How sweet is that? How much compassion there is. I cannot thank you enough for that word. Instead of calling part that is doing some kind of soothing behavior, addictive parts, right? They are soothers.
Yeah, and again, some people, it's very, very common. I say, who named the part? Even the word binge. I've had people say, well, I have to say the word binge because it's important. I want to recognize that I do this extreme behavior. And I totally get that. And I don't want to minimize behaviors. And at the same time, I want to say, what happens? Who named it that? Or from self? Is that how self would name it? What else can we, what else is going on? There's more to going on. There's always more going on to firefighters than meets the eye. And we want to recognize that even in the way we name those parts. So I don't like to say disordered eating parts or ED part, my ED part, because it's not one. One restricts, one comfort eats, one might get rid of it in some kind of way or start to exercise. So that's 3 different parts. One might do a lot of counting of calories, of steps, of all of that kind of thing. So it's a complexity, and we want to honor that these parts are all trying to help. And
can I ask you if I can? Yes, and I just really feel it's very important what you're bringing to the table of supporting people with intense soothers or mild soothers is a notion of compassion and realizing their positive intention. Can you share a little bit about how expressing compassion, both like how the therapist can see these parts with compassion and we can see our parts that are doing, I remember myself eating boxes of chocolate when I was a teenager, and only now I can understand what was underneath that. I just thought I like sweets, but no.
Right.
How does this self-energy
yeah.
How does the self-energy and compassion play a role in the healing process of our mild or intense soothing behaviors?
There's a couple ways. So first, the way that the therapist, first of all, just as a therapist, we recognize that each client has a system. Every client has managers, every client has firefighters, and every client has exiles. So waiting to find out what they are, as opposed to and asking, well, how do you resource yourself? How do you relax at the end of the day? How do you soothe yourself after a day like today? What are the, asking people, because we know that they do. We ask them what kind of work they do. We ask them what's happening with their relationships. And we need to ask, how are you trying to take a break? How is that working for you? Do you feel that you have much of a break? And just asking those kinds of questions. So that's self-energy on the part of the therapist, is to recognize and make invitation, invite the client and invite those parts. Even if the client is in managers and saying, well, I don't know, I mean, not much. I mean, at the end of the day, I just kind of try to, play with my dog or something. And then later they talk about comfort eating right after work, or, spending weekends, using edibles or other things, Valium, other kinds of pills that they're using on weekends. or during the week, but whatever their practice is. So, but to start from, I know you need to find ways to take a break, soothe, relax. The essence of a firefighter, it's protecting the exile by putting out the fires of shame, is a firefighter that's adapting to internalized attachment wounds and trauma and loss. But we have a role for firefighters in a healthy system. Managers function and help us also improve. Firefighters help us shift gears, relax. They promote rest, relaxation, sweetness, pleasure, novelty, trying to do things a different way, trying something new. So they promote that, just as managers promote getting the job done and getting better at it. They have that two-pronged thing. Which getting better at it means some can be distorted to become incredible self-judgment and self-criticism and perfectionism, which I find in almost every addictive system on the manager side of the street. So, and on the firefighter side of the street, we have a variety of firefighters that we all have, and some of them have become extremely dangerous and high risk, and that's scary for the client and for the therapist. But the point being is that at their root, it's not just managers that have a positive function. Firefighters have a positive function as well. Managers' function has gone crazy. They caretake everybody else, don't take care of themselves, and then are very hard on themselves. That'll be a classic manager setup. I put everyone else first, but my critic, my perfectionist, my judgment is very hard on myself. And then firefighters are like, they need a break. All that negative manager talk, it doesn't change firefighters. I think you don't get it. It all falls into the exile's lap. It sort of refills that reservoir of exile pain. So there is someone listening inside, and they're hurting from it. So this is a hurting, suffering system, and then firefighters are like, we need out. We need a break. So bringing the therapist, you asked me about compassion. The therapist has to start with accepting that everyone's system is looking for balance, that everyone's system is looking for balance between work hard, do right, and rest, and relax, and find pleasure and sweetness in life. Everyone is looking for this. This is the human condition. This is universal, and it's good. It's a balance. It's the work-life balance, if you want to talk about it that way, that everyone's talking about, right?
Exactly.
So, but when no one's ever taken care of us, and we've been neglected and perhaps exploited as well, taken our innocence and our bodies taken advantage of, then our balance, the neglect and pain is so severe that our managers get very severe in their pursuit of perfection and functioning. We can become workaholic and perfectionistic or extremely caretaking, and our firefighters get extreme to take care of all that pain with their various kinds of soothing and checking out, and keeping us, dissociation, helping us leave the room, leave the scene. So these are gifts that we have developed, and we want to start from a place of all clients have some level of this going on and invite it. And this will help our clients and all their parts be received. So compassion starts with a therapist.
Compassion starts with the therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And the therapist can kind of, sorry?
Yeah, which means we want to know our own system a little bit.
Yes, looking back at my, at my soothing parts, definitely sitting with them, finding the vulnerability, who they were trying to care for, got me into a place of big, huge compassion for my own parts.
I love that you said that, and I love that you remember eating boxes of chocolates when you were in your teen years. And I have found, I saw your little face. Your face just went, ooh. It still brings a wince, doesn't it? Either a pain or shame or just,
shame, right. Lots of shame.
But this is the other thing I've been doing more of lately and inviting more, is inviting people to go back to firefighters from back in the day when they used to smoke cigarettes in high school, even a simple one like that. But going back to eating chocolates and to go back to that part, find her. She was sitting alone in her bedroom. She had brought chocolates in there all by herself. No one knew she had them. or it's late at night and she pulls them out in the middle of the night because she can't sleep, or she gets up in the middle of the night and sneaks downstairs and eats cereal in the middle of the night. Going back to these kinds of parts of us and saying, hi, I see you. I see
Mm.
what you're doing. I see you are alone. And so it's just starting to relieve isolation from those parts. And then you say, how were you trying to help me? And these parts, no. Well, I had to. What were you afraid would happen if you didn't help me with that? You wouldn't be able to sleep. And then what would happen? You'd be filled with anxiety about having to go to school. Any kid who's been marginalized in any way, whether they're part of the LGBTQ community and identifying as queer, if there's some kind of neurological thing going on with them, they don't understand why they don't fit in, or there's just family chaos and they think I am not normal, my family's not normal, and I got to go and I got to show up, and so they have enormous anxiety and needing to find a way to function. So exile, the firefighters know this stuff. They'll be like, oh no, because you're going to wake up and think about it all night and never sleep, for instance. So,
Mhm.
okay, wow. So you're trying to help me get away from some difficult thoughts and to help me sleep. And you know about parts of me that obsess, or parts of me. So they know about the managers that obsess, who get work too much. They also know about the exiles. You don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel like you belong.
So
So
there is kind of this loop when it comes to this addictive processes and
yes,
self-soothing. There is a loop. There is not feeling okay, working hard to compensate that, then
yeah,
firefighters take the lead, and then the shame, and then we come back, right? So there's it's like a wheel, and for a
exactly.
lot of people it's a just insanely difficult wheel to get off.
It
So
is.
how we get off?
Well, I love that you're identifying it because it resonates, right? It just resonates. And that's what I say. We're not in level one, we learn to find part. What is a part? How is a part? And again, the word part is just a way to talk about an aspect of our functioning, a way in which we function, a sort of concerted effort that we have in different areas. But in level two and beyond, and when we're thinking about moving more deeply into the model, we also talk about pattern. What is my pattern? And I'll have people find a firefighter and an easy one that eats chips or crisps at night while you watch Netflix. And maybe you have an alcoholic beverage, or maybe you have edibles nearby you too, or maybe you don't, or whatever it is you're doing, or maybe you're doing sports betting. All this, everything's on the phone, right? Social media is on the phone, sports betting's on the phone, porn is on the phone. The most common time to use porn is during the workday on the phone. I used to think it was in the evenings or at night. No. Mm-mm. So what's happening for us? So, when we begin to make space for those parts and notice after we get off that phone, we finally can close it or, turn it off, then we're filled with shame and disgust. And the firefighters, excuse me, and the critics are now like massively intense. What is wrong with you? Or they have massive anxiety because you've been avoiding some tasks at work or at home or something like that. So the self recrimination and the need to make up time or make up tasks that have been lost during that time of being sort of checked out is severe. So everyone's all the parts are in such a severe place. So what I like to do with clients is just start by grouping the parts together. All right. So wait, okay, so you have a part that gets you on track, you have a part that's sort of beating everybody up inside, and you have a part that's actually very caretaking in a certain kind of way of your boss, or your partner or your kids or whatever. So let's just notice, we don't have to name them all. Let's put all, and I'll do table exercising or sitting around a campfire or sitting outside, some kind of exercise where we can start to visualize our system so we can see our pattern. Say, all right, let's all the managers pile up on this side of your body, on this side of a table. And then all the parts, okay, what did you mention? Okay, yeah, okay. So you're on your phone and yet you're doing some gaming and you did some sports betting, or sometimes you use some porn, or your porn is maybe your thing, or shopping, right? All the things. So okay, we've got a little bit of all of them. All right, let's line them all up on this side, and then we have some food stuff over there. And let's pause. Let's sit you at the head of this table. And before we even get to any exiles, they may not come up. Let's just, in some kind of way, appreciate that your managers are trying to keep you going and your firefighters are trying to give you relief.
Mm.
And you let those sides know that you need them both. You need them both. You're not going to get rid of either side. You're not going to kick anybody out. Now, both sides probably have to make some changes in behavior, right? It's very hard to give up soothing while we continue to beat ourselves up. And yet it's very hard to stop beating ourselves up while we continue to do something that causes chaos and risk.
Yes.
So when we welcome both sides and say, I need you both, and I'm going to work with you both, over and over and over again, clients begin to settle. And I say, and then they say, yeah, and I feel hopeless about this, or I feel shame. I say, all right, they go around across from you, foot of the table. Does anything here look familiar? How long has this been going on for you? How long has this debate about do it, don't do it been going on for you? How much your part's trying in this power struggle to keep you going, and to both keep you going and to get you to quit, right? Quit, get going, quit, get going. So just to appreciate, but every part of you. So the reframe that these parts are trying to help you, and the sense of looking at pattern is, again, these parts, their pattern is, this is how you've learned to function.
Yeah.
Maybe since you're quite young. So can we look at this and so just honoring that these parts are trying to help you function. And yes, they've gone crazy. Yes, they have, but it is never just the firefighters.
You confirm that there are indeed no bad parts.
Right. And again, when there is a bad part, guess who's saying it? 94% of the time it is manager. The firefighters.
That one is bad.
Right. I mean, the firefighters maybe don't like what the managers are up to, but the firefighters would be like, this part never relaxes. But that vicious inner talk, and again, those managers are very burdened. They may have grown up listening to vicious external talk, and they absorbed all that. And they're carrying, burdens from family, legacy burdens, and it can come down and if we've been in any kind of, we or our family, our community has been marginalized, if we're a person of color in the United States, the larger systems are full of negative talk and direct attacks. And then it may go into community, church, school, direct attacks on individuals, families, groups.
It's a lot of burden.
Right. So it's 3 big levels of burden. And I love Tamala Floyd, who taught me in IFS. She's another lead trainer. She said, for communities that have been marginalized and discriminated against, people of color in the United States, particularly people who identify as Black, in the historic institutionalized racism and violence. She said, we start with the legacy burdens first. And I thought that was so brilliant, and it makes so much sense. So again, but what do we have to do to get to noticing I have a legacy burden? Is start to listen. What are my managers holding? What are my firefighters holding? And again, the protector's job is to keep us away from our vulnerability. So if we want to know what the exiles are, we've got to honor those protectors first. And as they settle a little bit, we can have a direct line to our exiles. It opens. It's right there. So this is why working with the system in the first session, listening to the narrative and hearing the managers and hearing the firefighters and starting to set that up and is just powerful.
Yes, IFS model is very, very different from so many different approaches to healing addictive behaviors and self-soothing behaviors. It's really something else and something different that allows us to welcome, understand, welcome, validate those parts of us and see their good intention, which automatically, in my experience, reduces the shame and increases the compassion. The moment you understand their good intention, it kind of things start to balance out.
That's right. That reframe is very powerful. And people say, I can't see it that way. That part has just ruined my life. And I'll say, that is the negative self-talk you wake up with every morning, isn't it? How much you've ruined your own life. So let's just pause here. What if those are parts of you too that are habituated in inner contempt and in beating you up? So there isn't just one habit. There isn't just one compulsive behavior. Self-attack is also compulsive.
Thank you for saying that. And I just really want, people who are listening to this and they are starting to pick on those things that we are discussing and recognizing what is happening in their own internal system. And would you say that IFS can offer us hope, even when this process has been for a very long time, or we have been hiding our addictive processes, even from ourselves or, from our spouses and things like that? Can IFS really offer hope of getting out of this roundabout and finding some self-leadership?
That's a great question. I love the word hope, because if you've tried to fix yourself 100,000 times, if every morning you get up and say, I'm going to do it different today, and you've failed, as the system says to you, then you have to have hopeless parts. In addition to which, if you grew up in a family where no one got better when you were young, things got worse, or they just never got better, or the people in your life currently are all suffering too, people are still out there using, or still violent, still suffering with their own mental functioning. If you see a lot of people around you not getting better, then you're going to have hopeless parts. So I want to say to those clients, but hopelessness is one aspect because of the person, and it's a vital one. And at the same time, coming to see someone like you or me is a sign of hope. It's a willingness to work despite the massive amount of hopelessness. So we honor the parts, the managers that get us here. And we also say, and what if we can, first of all, I say the first way to do an unblend is not to unblend. Let's just honor that hopeless parts or how big that hopelessness is in your system, and honor and say, well, of course it's there. It's been there since you were a tiny child. As you watch people around you suffer, be unhappy, be unwell, and do bad things. So and at the same time, you tell that part, we want to know, and a certain amount of hopelessness is reality check. Who's getting better and who isn't? So I say, we have a hopeless part, and at the same time, we don't want it to run your system. So we make space for it. We keep listening to it. We might be able to unburden some old stuff from back in the day. It's just like the issue of trust. If you have been betrayed, if the people who say they love you or are supposed to take care of you are the ones who have hurt you or abandoned you or made your life very, very unworkable and painful, then you don't have trust in people who say they're there for you. And that also includes therapists, of course. This is exactly what transference is. It's people legitimately saying, someone who says they're going to be good to me, it does not work out well. Yeah. So I'm just waiting to hear when you abandon me too. So this is how those parts aren't crazy. That's exactly what happened. So when we begin to listen to those hopeless parts and those distrusting parts, and I don't say, I'm not telling you to be hopeful about everyone and everything. And I'm not telling you to trust everyone and everything. But if you self and you decide together when to have hope and who to trust and who not to trust and when not to have hope. Misplaced hopes keeps us in relationships that aren't serving us for a long, long time while we hope someone gets better. Yes. And misplaced trusts keeps us in dangerous or high-risk situations over and over again until we know who to trust and who not to trust. Some people are not trustworthy, and some people, unfortunately, in this lifetime aren't going to make big changes. So hopelessness is so often needs to be respected, and distrust respected first, and build a relationship with self, and then self and those parts can decide how to look at the future. And in addition, those parts can say hopeless about our parts, but once they see self and watch self interact with the firefighters, interact with those inner perfectionists in a new way, we can offer new hope right in the therapy hour. And go back to that hopeless part and say, will you watch us work with this part? How is that for you? So
That sounds amazing.
yeah, it's a very active process. And it's also, in a sense, those are exiles, but they're there also. I would say you deserve to have them. You've earned that because of what you've had to survive and go through and bring here. So you tell those parts you get it. And at the same time, what if everything's not hopeless and everyone's not hopeless and all your parts aren't hopeless and everyone's not untrustworthy? Some are, some aren't. So
Yes.
this is where IFS allows us to have clarity, really clear connections to our parts.
How can we get parts to start trusting a little bit more to the self? It's been like their lifelong experience, like, oh, you will again do this that we decided that you will not do. And yeah, at some point, parts just totally give up on self. And how to restore this internal trust between self and parts.
I think that change is, sometimes we have a big change, but most change is incremental. It happens in time, and it happens through patience and persistence. And I think that one of the things I would say to IFS therapists over and over again around consultation is, you aren't doing anything wrong, you just have to keep doing it. And just because you haven't seen dramatic change, you and your client, doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. So one of the ways that we develop trust, the parts to develop trust in the self, is the same way the therapist and the client can develop trust, which is every time I hear them in a critic, I say, okay, pause here. That's the critic just told me about your week. I don't let it go half the time. I say, no, that's a part. So I have to be sort of, Janina Fisher her model is very much based on IFS. She says you have to be relentless, and I love that word. And you have, another word that we use is persistent. I have to persistently name parts that are running the show. And so then, and the client go, oh, right, I guess I am. So in that level of recognition, as I say, clients do not unblend themselves. Ultimately, they say, oh, I'm in a part, but not generally. So whose job is it? It's our job. So we begin to help them notice the negative self-talk, or we notice the soothing, or we notice the checking out, or we notice the shame. And we help them begin to notice that. Then it's through the interconnection. I see you. First thing, we leave isolation. You're not alone. You're usually alone, perfectionist, but right now I'm with you. I notice you. So a lot of times, once the managers start to really believe that self exists, they then can give space to have us have better, deeper access to firefighters and a better, deeper access to exiles. But really, in essence, managers are so often gatekeepers. Even someone with a massive addictive issue, they come in, I have to quit doing this or else. And I say, there's self in that statement. There's also a lot of urgent managers that we got to meet. So helping managers trust, building connection to perfectionism, to critics, to our caretakers, these core activities that have been so deeply embedded in our functioning is really, really helpful. And as I say to the managers, okay, have you fixed those firefighters yet? Have you fixed the drinker yet? I mean, you've been beating it up for 25 years. Have you fixed it yet? No. All right. How about if we try something new? Like right now, like you just give me 5 minutes or 4 minutes and let us talk to that part in a different way, and you step back. So we really have to help managers understand that they have been beautiful in getting us out of the house when we were 7 years old and we were living with hopelessness and craziness. And at the same time now, we have some new options for them.
Yeah.
We, so they can take a break every once in a while. As I say, tell the managers there's nothing wrong with them. We just want to have them choice when to run the show and when they can take a break.
Yes. Yes. We want our managers to take a break sometimes.
Yes.
What everything you're sharing, it's mind-boggling, to be honest, because it's like the world is turning upside down listening to this, because we are so conditioned to blame and shame ourselves for doing certain things, and also blame and shame those we love or those around us that are doing certain things. This is just how it works in the world.
Yes,
and people do it to us, we do it to ourselves, then we do it to others. And this is how this massive structure has been created of blame, shame, and then exiling, and then compensating, all of that. And everything you shared blows minds. We have to respect the parts. We have to listen to the parts. We have to honor parts. It's complete shift in paradigm of relationship with ourselves and with others. It's really, really transformational.
It really is, Letta. And I think it's just, we've been doing IFS at a residential treatment center called High Watch. They've been trained, all their staff, level 1, level 2, their coaches, their therapists, all the clinicians there. So helping us, there's people in school systems. There's so many ways in which we're entering systems to help the system have an opportunity to think a little bit differently about the inner system. And because you're right, I always say we think that's that sort of classic thing about fish don't know that they're in water. We don't know we breathe the air of self-blame and self-attack. That sort of manager energy is so deep within our culture. And so when we begin to have a little space from it, we talked in the beginning about spiritual traditions and intersection of spiritual traditions. Why is it such a commonality about spiritual traditions? Eastern, Western, God-centered, not God-centered. Why is it such a tradition to learn to accept ourselves, to love ourselves? Why do we need that? Because we don't. Because the nature is not to be anxious, to be wary. There's been a lot of danger, right? So to know when we're in danger and when we're not is such a key thing to learn. And our spiritual traditions also can give us another resource for as a way to accept that it's okay to accept ourselves as we are in this moment. And most spiritual traditions try to find ways through prayer, meditation, reflection, readings, to rework that view of the self as someone God loves, right? Someone lovable by someone somewhere, or something somehow. But this idea that we are lovable is sort of a key to spiritual tradition. And I think it's because it's so difficult to do.
Thank you for touching upon this. It was one of my questions. Do you think spirituality can be one of the ways for our soothers or firefighters to manage the exiles? Do you think even meditation or prayers or things like that can be used as an addictive process?
Oh, I see. Sure. We can turn anything into a firefighter. We can become compulsive, in other words, about anything. And we can become, some people will say people are addicted to their 12-step groups, for instance. And is that a bad thing or a good thing? Or people can be involved in spiritual bypass, where they turn everything over to God and sort of ignore and want to ignore their painful feelings, their negative feelings, and want to only think positive thoughts, but not but that also blocks our feelings of vulnerability when we're hurt, when we're angry, when we're suffering. So it certainly, we can use spirituality or anything to take us away and give us a break. And I always want to be extremely respectful with someone when I say, is it possible that there's a part here that's helping you sort of turn this over to God, and yet at the same time help you not feel? And so this is, again, this is a very sort of nuanced question, and to think that, because from self, we're not trying to, self does not avoid reality. Self is in reality. And sometimes, as they say, our exiles know. When you exile says, ask your exile what was he holding at the time. It said no one was coming. So you tell the exile, that's right. That's self energy. No one was coming. There's the pain of that is the burden. The reality of that is self energy. No one's coming. So there's ways in which we know things, and in self we know things. And what we want to watch for in our clients, is there a way that there's parts that don't want them to know things just now. And we want to respect that, and respect that that helps them get through, and not break that open, but listen to those parts. And when they know that there's a self that's present, and that's a time-consuming process sometimes, then they can trust that there's something else we can do with the pain. So spirituality can be very, very helpful as an ease of pain. And it also can take us away from other feelings as well.
Thank you so much for sharing your transformational process of changing this whole paradigm of how we relate to ourselves. And hopefully, as we change it internally, we can relate to others with more compassion and honor, in an honorable way, and with more respect, and definitely making the world a better and safer, a warmer and lighter place. So your contribution to this is phenomenal, and thank you for taking on yourself this pillar, which is definitely so complex and charged and not easy. Absolutely.
Right. And it's not easy for me too. I have lots and lots of addictive processes in my, in my family, extended family. It's been all around me all my life. So this idea of what to do around it and how to be with it in a different way is really powerful for me personally, and of course, professionally. So, we always come from, what does my system need? My system needs a plan. I need a better plan than the one I had. And, so it's really helpful, and I'm happy to share it and to offer it to others and allow them to tweak it a little bit and move us forward.
Yes. And I'm definitely learning a lot from your wisdom, and I hope you will continue creating and offering, and workshops and trainings and all your contribution to the model. And in this regards, this topic is huge, and I really do hope maybe someday, somehow, we will talk about this again, and hope to meet you in person, Sis.
Thanks, Lotta. And people can go to my website and sign up for my newsletter and keep up with things that are being offered, because there's new things coming out all the time at IFSI and in my own work. So thanks for inviting me and allowing me to give some space to talk to you and to others.
Thank you.